S.A.G.E session, and this is our little preliminary intro just to make sure that our technical pieces are working and we are being seen and heard. There's Sue saying, Buenos dias from Cancun. Thank you, Sue. So I'm assuming, well, I'll wait to hear if you're seeing us, seeing and hearing us correctly. You guys give a welcome as well so they can
Hello,
see if
Sue.
your
Hey,
audio is working.
Sue. Hey, Arnie, if you're there.
All
Nice
right.
that you're here.
Hello from Rome. We can hear and see you. Yes, I see and hear and see.
Hey,
Okay,
Roman.
great. Okay, wonderful. Well, if we're there, we're there. We're here.
Okay.
I think we can start. Okay, I'll give us an official start here. Well, this is the 14th S.A.G.E podcast that we do live. And thanks for everybody who is live with us right now. And look forward to your comments. And as you saw from Jake talking today about being somewhat the possibility of disorientation within S.A.G.E. Jake, you want to lead us off?
Yeah, hello, everybody. Aloha from Hawaii. I had suggested that today, one of the things we hear a fair amount is people start to learn SAGE, and sometimes people will say, this is hard. And I always ask people why. What is it that you find difficult? And of course, part of what we're doing is we're inviting you to break a habit. We're inviting you to come off autopilot and to speak in a way that's more deliberate and intentional. That in and of itself can have certain challenges. But what I find happens is that people seem to disorient themselves. And I think there's a few parts to this. When we start to use the language of personal agency, we develop more awareness. And through that awareness, I'm starting to reveal myself to myself. I'm seeing myself with fresh eyes. I'm seeing myself as creating the dynamic I have in my relationships. I'm seeing myself making meaning in ways where I make myself anxious. Now, as soon as I do that, there's a likelihood, if I'm in OS2, there's a likelihood to be self critical or judgmental. And as soon as I do that, I impede my own progress. So remember that one of the aspects of SAGE is the no praise, no blame. And the idea behind that is that what each of us does, how we conduct ourselves, makes perfect sense. You know, if I were born in your shoes and I had all of your experiences, I would be doing what you do. So we each make sense, but that doesn't mean that I'm optimizing myself. And the point with SAGE is to wake myself up, to reveal myself to myself so that I start to have more choices. I start to be able to respond more consciously instead of on autopilot. So we thought we'd spend a little time talking about this today. And if people have questions, if you want to share, do you disorient yourself? Do you find that this is difficult? And if so, you know, please share, ask questions, and we'll have conversation about all of this.
As you said, I think I experienced changing a habit, stopping one, starting one, replacing one is, yeah, we don't want to say it's hard, but disorienting. I like the word. I have oriented myself to X, and now I am reorienting over somewhere else. And in between is I often feel disoriented. I remind myself of the book that we read, Jake, by William Bridges on transition, the way of transition. And he talks about that going from one thing to another. We often think about change, but in the middle is the opportunity to transition, to grow and evolve in essence. And I have experienced a lot. I've disoriented myself a lot through this process. Even we had a conversation this morning, and looking at the attachments I've had in the past and the value I gave those, positive things that I really liked. And now to realize it is not the source, was not the source of my feelings and my value. It was me. It was the meaning I was making up. I get that intellectually. I think I disorient myself with it, and I spend more time these days in that, trying to be okay just in the disorientation. Go, well, it makes sense that I would be, and I assume I will orient myself over here into a new place and to some degree be more secure. Though sometimes I ponder, well, I'll put this to you, sometimes I ponder, and do I also just get used to a level of comfort in disorienting myself?
Yeah, I think what happens, this reminds me of John Weir saying something to me when we were running our workshops, our labs, and sometimes in the early days, something would happen and I would make myself anxious. Somebody in the community might, I don't know, be having a hard time or sharing things that appeared to be making everyone uncomfortable. And I would call John and say, "What do you think?" And he would say, "Just reveal yourself. Go back to the group and reveal whatever it is that you're doing to yourself." And when he said whatever you're doing to yourself, it was not like I was doing something bad. It was simply that I was creating meaning in a way where I was making myself anxious. And his point was, just keep revealing yourself. Just keep revealing yourself, and you will move through the disorientation and you will come out somewhere else. And we can't always predict where that is. But in that process, the way we talk about it is that we sane ourselves. I feel more sane. I make myself feel more grounded. I go, okay, this is what I'm doing. And as soon as I share what I'm doing with other people, something shifts, particularly people who are open-minded and receptive and available to witness. Very powerful moment where we reveal ourselves and another person essentially is saying, okay, I see you, I hear you. Very powerful.
And the key moment is realizing I am doing this. I am making meaning. Everything I'm thinking is made up by me.
That that concept, you guys both there, in I'm thinking, I just typed it out, I'm revealing, I mean, to some degree, if I go back in time, I would, I'm tempted to say I was in disorientation when I was outside of Sage. That was some of my own insanity feelings of the negative feelings I was experiencing were a result of being disoriented, but I was comfortable. It was at least a familiar disorientation. Um, Moving out of that, kind of the devil you know is better than devil you don't. I think I experienced some aspects of that, and so even as I I feel freeing, that I'm freeing myself with the Sage orientation, I also realize that that's like me start talking faster here and I'll revert right out of Sage language, of the language of personal agency. I'll go back to it. It's still a rut, a habit, and even maybe a comfort. And I maybe discomfort myself as well as disorient when well, as you said, when I speak according to personal language, agency language, and I reveal myself. Maybe I don't always want to do that. I'm still learning.
Well, I think that I don't want to do that when I reveal things that I'm critical of. And that's why I say we want to take away the praise and the blame so that we reveal things and just see whatever I'm doing, however I'm creating meaning. I simply want to observe. That's what I'm doing. I'm discomforting myself through X, Y, and Z. I guess we could say a little bit. This past weekend or last week, we had our eldest daughter visit, and she doesn't live in the S.A.G.E orientation. And we both struggled ourselves being around someone who was not in the orientation and kind of insisted that things are the way that she thinks they are. This is the way the world is. And that's not really open for discussion or exploration. And so, first thing I did is I made a greater effort to connect, but I didn't feel that I was succeeding. And then I withdrew. And by withdrawing, I, I think she interpreted that as me not wanting her here, me being kind of cold. So then I perceived things got worse, more tension in the house. And this only shifted when when Hannah and I talked about this and I acknowledged what I was doing and that I was creating something that didn't feel comfortable, seemed to be causing stress for someone else. And then I stepped in to the situation, partially by revealing and partially by letting our daughter know that, um, you know, whatever the tension was, I was going to take responsibility for the tension. And I'm sorry about the tension, and I want you to feel welcomed here. So as soon as I owned what was going on, the whole dynamic shifted.
Mary, I see your comments and I want to address those next. I also want to recognize what you just shared, that you guys had a daughter visiting you and not everything was perfect.
That's right.
That there was tension, really. So the sage gurus had tension in a relationship. Son of a gun. I think it was this morning in a message to someone else who was dealing with it. I came back to what we've discussed. Does being sage just fix everything? For me, that's not the point. Um, I think it gives me the best possibility and opportunity to fix the external things. But what I experienced with you guys going through this with your daughter is, well, you did talk about you addressed it and had some relational connect and benefit. But to begin with, point one, in your awareness of it, you, as we say, saned yourself, SANED. You accepted your own responsibility, personal agency, and saned yourself instead of continuing down. You could have degraded into frustration and anger and things that would have given less opportunity for an external benefit. Fair?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Uh, this could have gone very poorly. Yeah.
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 Mary, I see your note. She is in the live chat here in YouTube, and she says, I am revealing more of myself to me, and I have discovered I feel comforted and really like to give myself value and confidence by praising myself when I do stuff right. Sage alerts me to wander. But then and then she said, maybe I don't like myself and don't want to reveal it all. I can relate. We were talking a minute ago about revealing, and I think I discomfort myself sometimes in revealing my unawareness and probably judge myself. Now we're back to no praise and no blame, judging. I I find myself, thank goodness I become aware, but I can tend to do that, Mary. I think that is probably a place that where I have to watch judging myself, is realizing, oh, I just spoke and run on bunch of paragraphs and said it 10 times and frustrate myself with having fallen out of awareness. And I can do that in the past. I can go to the past. I've had some times of struggling with myself of wishing I had been more sage in my past in regards to some of my circumstances that I think would have gone much better, but I can't go back. So here we are.
Couple comments. One is you may not be able to go back, but you may be able to, we call it redoing. You may
Yeah.
be able to redo yourself. So if there's someone in your past and you feel that the way you conducted yourself caused something you didn't want to cause, one of the things we do is we go back and we redo ourselves. We say to the person, this is what I did. I'm not happy with myself having done that. I would like to say what I said to you in a different way, and I'm going to do it now. And I find that cleans up a lot of the little messes from the past that I might have a tendency to carry around. I can't always do that. Sometimes the other person's not available. Sometimes they're not still alive. But I try and do that as much as I can. And then the other thing I want to say, Mary, is when I reveal something about myself that I don't like, which happened this past weekend, I didn't like the fact that our daughter was here, and based on what she told me, my behavior contributed to her feeling uncomfortable. I don't like that. I don't want to conduct myself in that way. I realize that I am. Hannah more or less confirms, yeah, I am. You are doing that. As soon as I see that, the question I have is, what can I do? What else can I do? How else can I shift? How else can I interact? So
How am I making meaning of this interaction?
right. And if the way I'm making meaning is not constructive, instead of being critical, I immediately go to, well, what can I do differently? And as soon as I go there, I stop judging myself.
To Mary, what you said, maybe I don't like myself. To me, that brings up obviously one of the, not obviously, obvious to me, one of the key agreements or focal points in Sage of identity. Not liking me. So if I don't like me, my first aspect of awareness is, well, who the heck is me? As opposed to what Jake just said, that he was questioning his behavior, not himself the whole, but a behavior, and how he was, and how I look at identity now as not a fixed object, a rigid construct, but it is simply how I am identifying now. How I'm identifying. We were talking about Ram Dass this morning, and he referred to himself, and this may sound hoodoo guru to some of you, but I align with it as I've continued to give focus to loving awareness. What was the other term, Jake?
I talked about pure awareness.
Right.
Pure awareness, and you said that in in this recent book, mostly he's using the expression loving awareness.
And that's how he strives to identify with everything, himself and everything. And so if we're doing that, loving awareness towards ourselves, how we're identifying, and I now would align, Mary, with, there are sometimes I find ways that I'm identifying with things that I don't like. I don't find constructive. And now, in being aware of them and accepting agency over those, I get to change my behavior, just as Jake talked about.
Yeah, we've talked about bringing awareness, and Ram Dass put a little bit of English spin on that when he talked about loving awareness. So as soon as sort of projecting, as soon as he became aware of something where he may have been self-critical, if he brought loving awareness to that, I think he would have freed himself. It would have been I perceive that to be a very constructive loop that sort of takes us to healthier and healthier places.
And brings you more present.
I don't seem to be able to get your current location.
Oh, somebody's phone's talking.
Siri's talking to us.
Well, I found myself, as I was reading about him, awareness with intent, with a positive intent. I guess I could, in theory, It's hard for me to hold both of them. I could be aware and be aware of my ill intent for whatever. So I took that as, yeah, his loving intent. This aspect of disorienting, yeah, those of you who are, I'd be curious to hear how you may have felt disoriented with the language. To me, it seems like we hear feedback from that, and I have. I continue. I'm sitting here now on a live camera, thinking about what I am saying. Otherwise, I will fall out and go right back into the autopilot language, and I'm unaware of myself. I'm unaware of what I am thinking. So I'm more comfortable doing this, even though it still doesn't feel, I was gonna say, as fluent. I don't know if that's a fair term. I To be aware in it. I still am disoriented, I think, within that. I don't even know what being oriented would be like. I mean, I experience you guys. You have a different rhythm of communication that when I first met you would have been easy to think, oh, they're just slow spoken people. And yet it was probably hearing you correct yourselves that I realized, no, this is the awareness. And as I do it, I mean, again, we've all been brought up in an orientation of objective language, of objective belief, even. And talk about, could it be the most ingrained habit that we know beyond breathing? I don't know if that's a habit.
And a couple of times you said, I felt disoriented, I am disoriented. And disorientation, I want to remind all of us, I'm doing that to myself too. I'm the one who's disorienting myself. But what I've done is I framed disorientation in a fairly positive light. If I'm disorienting myself, in some way I need to reorient. I want to reorient. And that is a moment where I excite myself. I no longer stick myself. I no longer make myself feel stuck. So disorientation, when I disorient myself, essentially it's like that's the alarm clock going off, little wake up call,
Reminder.
reminder.
I like the reorient. I mean, so much of, as we look at SAGE being, we are interpreting everything as a primary premise, that now I find myself reinterpreting everything, reinterpreting my life. We spent time again on a phone call or a Zoom call this morning, as I think I was experiencing a further reorientation of my experience, of my lived experience.
Yeah.
Even going back into the past, I am continually curious on reinterpreting things from the past, because when I go back and think, gosh, I experienced something, I probably reacted immaturely, I understood it immaturely, I was not aware, I was not sage. And so now I go back and I don't just paint a rosy picture, I reinterpret what I perceive happened. That can be very, probably in a positive way. I think of it as a positive way, but disorienting to go, gosh, what was that thing in the past that I thought it was? Now I'm saying, what? Maybe it wasn't. I disorient myself towards a more constructive outcome, a more constructive understanding. But yeah, I do to a degree feel like I'm just in a continued evolution of disorientation, disorienting myself.
Well, from my perspective, the degree to which you've embraced this, I make sense of the fact that you're disorienting yourself. For example, you've committed yourself in the last few weeks to really trying to minimize the use of it.
Hmm.
And that requires a level of awareness that, in and of itself, is unfamiliar to most people.
I okay. I'm wondering as we're talking here, as we don't want to say the sage orientation is hard. We don't want to say that. Could it be harder for some than others? I would tend to think it might be. And I would wonder if, even as I have been desiring and accepting that the habits, I'm really thinking towards attachments. If you have, I think my attachments in regards to my identity, I perceive them as pretty significant. And so maybe I've had uh, I've challenged myself a little bit more than maybe somebody else would who did not have such staunch attachments, especially to their identity. Even as I've had a great willingness, obviously, for this journey, but my attachments, man, the stories, I, I had big stories uh, that I
You,
believed were
I
existed.
perceive you to have had big stories and uh, big awareness and big curiosity,
Right.
and that the curiosity offset the attachment. Whereas if I were to talk about our daughter, I would say she has seriously big attachment to the way things are, which is the way she sees the world is the way the world is. The way she sees us is the way we are. So big attachment with low curiosity, that I perceive as a very, very challenging combination.
Hmm.
I think of that as being stuck in attachment. I don't think of you, Kevin, as being stuck in attachment. I hear you acknowledge them, talk about them, curious yourself about your attachments, but I don't experience you as stuck in them.
Thanks. I agree. I not stuck, and I would say it makes sense that I continue to evolve as I pursue this awareness. I become aware of more, and again, maybe that's the ongoing disorientation. I am interested in, again, not saying that the sage orientation should be hard. I'm curious though, if to understand, to read the sage blueprint, to understand the agreements, to understand the concepts, if you do, if one does, I'm prone to say, and I'll see what, I'll ask what you guys think, you should find yourself disoriented. If you don't, you probably just didn't get it. That sounds a little judgy. What do you think?
I'm good with a little judgy on that. I think that Sage is a different operating system, a different way of going through the world. And to go from where I was to this, I don't know how I do that without disorienting myself. Now, what some people are doing is equating disorienting with hard or difficult. That's a way of making meaning. That's not
Right.
necessarily true.
Could
There,
look at it as freeing myself.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, liberating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw this and now I see this. Wow. And
Yeah.
by the way, this is integrative, it's additive. In other words, I'm not getting, I'm not killing some part of myself, some idea I had. I am adding to. And this is where John Weir used to talk about the process of differentiating. So I am one, two, three, four beliefs, four ideas. And then I develop a new idea. Now I'm one, two, three, four, and five. So I just continue to become more complex, And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean I'm making new connections. I'm seeing things I haven't seen before, which gives me a greater capacity to relate with other people because I'm no longer so confined. I'm not confining myself. So again, how we make meaning of disorientation, of disorienting ourselves, is definitely part of the equation.
Agreed. I would say to that, I am pretty comfortable with disorienting myself, so I got that going for me, I guess. Uh, Yasmin says, "Do you
Yasmin.
just what's that?"
Saying hello to Yasmin.
Oh, she says, "Do you disorient yourself while you communicate with someone who sounds or who talks on autopilot most of the time?"
Well, we just had a fair amount of experience with that. I don't know that I disoriented myself as much as what did I do? I shut down.
Mhm.
I shut down. I didn't want to participate in the autopilot conversation. I tried a different approach unsuccessfully, and then I started to shut down. So I don't know about disorient. I just withdrew. Yeah.
My first thought was along the lines of saning myself, grounding myself when I hear someone speaking on autopilot and to what is and just objectively. I My experience in the past, I would have had maybe a propensity to disconnect, to disagree, to feel disagreement, whether I spoke it or not. And now in my head, I'm translating and going, oh, they're telling me about themselves. They're telling me what they experienced. They're not telling me about it. And I can either, well, then in my own awareness of, do I care? Do I care to enter in? And it may feel like there's no hope, there's no need, there's no benefit. And I kind of just back off, like you talked about, Jake, back myself off. Or if it's somebody who I think is open and I'm curious, I may address it. I may address what they are saying. And even, boy, I don't, this would get it. I think sometimes I'm adept at being able to rephrase it. And generally they don't get it. They don't even realize what I did, but I help myself at least. And I think I increase the connection
Mhm.
by doing that.
And I would just say, instead of addressing what they're saying, I think what I do is address what I'm doing with what they're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Get the distinction?
Yeah.
So if I address what my daughter is saying, I perceive she will get defensive. Would you be willing to let Totem out?
Yeah.
He's over there. We have a cat who's asking to get out, so Hannah, go get him.
Mary, Mary says fluid in the flow, authentic rhythm in O3 in OS3 for me allows me to explore a new way to dance and move. Disorientation with gravity, reframe to be more agile.
Yeah.
Disorientation with gravity. Um, my friend Randy speaks to as he continues to orient himself in Sage. He does sometimes speak to anchors, like things that he does want to hold on to as, and we don't have to go into this concept of truths, but I would say today, I'd say things that he chooses to and wants to trust in as anchors. So to gravity, I like that. Jared, my brother Jared, prior to Sage, we are oriented to one way of being. Adopting Sage requires disorienting by nature.
Yeah, I see that the same way, that to make the shift, I'm going to disorient myself to some degree.
Which I would say is why some will not want to. As we continue down this road of personal agency, and I like to speak to complete personal agency, that's what I'm practicing. I realize there could be a level of disorienting that someone just may not want. I mean, we all know that again, back to the devil you know is better than devil you don't. And just to tumble down those stories we've created, those constructs we've created of objectivity, uh, I have experienced people can threaten themselves to a great degree to literally want to just reject this. I'm out. I think as we continue to define and refine the essence of sage and this aspect of personal agency, taking full agency responsibility for everything, we will find people that are more prone to accept it or reject it. That's too much. And I have heard I have somebody I know who offended themselves with the level of personal agency that I was stating and has decided not to be in communication with me right now, or at least not engage with Sage. Yeah.
You said that they may choose to accept it or reject it, and I would say that would be to accept myself or reject myself. Right? So if a person is rejecting sage to some degree, they're rejecting themselves.
I align with that. Yeah. For me, it's a massive looking in the mirror. And I, uh, I wonder, I don't know. I wonder if in my past, if I would have had some aspects of rejecting or just not being able to conceive. I'm not sure. I don't know. Uh,
People want to be right. They want to be certain about certain things.
and in that, I thought I just wrote down I want to be secure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that what we think of as or what I look now as my past false certainty. Oh my gosh, I feel like I was one of the more certain people I've ever known in my religion, in my even pursuit of health and wellness. I was very certain and felt I thought I was certain and felt an aspect of security until I couldn't connect the dots any longer. Uh, and Yeah, I agree that we want to be secure, and that certainty seems secure until you can't make a case for it anymore. I think. Um, Mary, curious creative choreography offers a unique you to the world. Innovators do often go against the grain, rebel a bit, and develop alternative ways for art. And yeah, I would say for life. Um, Jared says, for me, the point is not to change the environment or the person, but to simply change the way I respond no matter what. Yeah.
Hey, Jared, I have a question for you. So I perceive you to be very thoughtful and quite wise. And now here's your brother delving deeply into this orientation, and I sense that you understand it. I'm curious, are you using this?
While there's a delay and he's typing out, my experience is yes, that he has had this perspective, an essence of this perspective for quite a while. Some of the ways we have maybe further defined it, more distinctions, I think he's aligned with. And then the language is, I assume, Jared, is the change, not speaking with the objective language. You may have hit on that. Well, I know Jared's a fan of uh, the four agreements, five agreements, Ruiz, who first agreements be impeccable with your word. I look forward and I want us to talk with him at some point. I think his alignment with adding the language of personal agency would align with his desire to be impeccable with your word, because I find I don't feel impeccability with referring to my description of something as what is. It is whatever. So I look for that. And Jared says, yes, I have the blueprint, and I went through it with Kevin, feel a deep resonance with it. I now have more tools and language to use on my path. Yeah, I'm eager, Jared, we're going to be together for about almost 3 weeks, and I will greatly enjoy the practice to get the sharing of this orientation and of the language, the personal agency language.
Part of the reason I ask, I'm kind of I excite myself for the two of you to be together and see how this goes. When people have a fairly clear sense of the world and how they're moving through the world, I always intrigue myself what happens when they're introduced to SAGE. Uh, I can't remember when I spoke about this. It may have been one of our earlier calls, but many years ago, I was at Goddard College, and there were the students, and then there were meat inspectors that were brought there because the president of the college wanted to have a significant impact. He wanted the experience of going to college to have a significant impact. So he felt that if we brought in people where this was really unusual, they were completely alien to this kind of environment, the impact would be much greater. And it turned out to be the case. These people had the greatest growth during those 4 years compared to the sort of traditional students who were, I'll oversimplify and say, kind of yuppies. Back then we weren't yuppies. But so I'm curious, with people who have done a lot of work, what happens when you start to change your language? Do you have new insights? Do you sane yourself more? Do you clear up some things that hadn't been clear before? So I'm just very curious to sort of see where you take yourself with this, Jared.
I probably pay attention to the language and using it with other people most when I'm doing a podcast. When I'm doing a podcast with the next guest that I have on, who's usually a doctor, a professor, a psychiatrist to some degree, and I will use the sage language, saying, man, I really excite myself with what I perceive you did here and whatnot. Generally, they don't bat an eye. It just kind of goes, I think, under the radar. I have had some, I don't think, I don't know that they were aware of what I said or how I said it specifically, but something in it, and they'll respond with, I really like how you
Mm.
said that. I really like how you phrase that. I think, and to me, it speaks to connection. That's me speaking sagely, with personal agency, subjectively, all those concepts. Me speaking that way, I perceive continues to increase connection with everyone that I speak to, and I would probably say, and lessens what disconnect might have happened otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The focus again here has been disorienting, the concept of disorientation. Yeah, if anybody else wants to put something in, we usually have gone an hour with these shows. We do not have to, and if we've come to a tidy end, we can just end there as well. But I like the concept, and I feel like I continue to comfort myself with being disoriented. But it may be, and I kind of wonder, do I get to a place where I'm not as, but if I continue to reveal myself to myself, which will be ongoing, I also again consider this continued just comforting myself in being somewhat disoriented. I mean, if you can't stamp everything as what is, as reality, truth, proof, fact, whatnot, and embrace the subjective nature, the mystery, some would say, I expect a continued comforting in that, in that space, but maybe also a continued disorienting. So I like that. We've talked about that. Even the Alan Watts book, what's the
wisdom of insecurity.
wisdom of insecurity. Yeah. And he makes again that claim of security is a myth, kind of throw it out as a result. You're just going to be always disoriented, is what I paraphrase him saying somewhat. Uh, throw out security. I perceive him and myself as, and you guys, and as finding a lot of security in uncertainty. Instead of throwing out security, I feel like I'm finding it in a more constructive way.
I'm smiling because I hear you keep using disoriented and disorientation as compared to owning that I'm disorienting myself. The years ago when I was training neurolinguistic programming, we had this test where people use words, and if you cannot put that word in a wheelbarrow, then you're using the word incorrectly. So disorientation is not a thing. I can't put it in a wheelbarrow. It's not a noun. I am disorienting myself. Disorienting is a process. It's not a thing. And when I refer to it as a thing, I confuse myself a little bit. I'm not aware of this. Most people aren't aware of this, but I'm confusing myself because I'm talking about a verb, a process, a doing, as if the thing I'm talking about is static. And when I talk about it as if it's static, that implies that this is going to be hard to change because it is disorientation. Well, there's no such thing as disorientation. There's no thing. I am disorienting myself. So I just come back to this, the significance of talking in a way where I'm taking ownership and I'm putting things into motion. Everything is in motion all the time. Years ago, we were in New Mexico. I don't know if that airplane overhead is, okay, not a problem. I was in New Mexico and I spent some time on the Hopi reservation, and I remember them talking, and they would say, a chair is a slow moving verb. A chair that we thought of as static and a thing to them was just a very slow moving verb. And just think of the idea that everything is in motion all the time and almost everything can change. And we have the capacity to bring about a lot of the change by the way we think and talk about whatever's going on.
Okay. Thanks. And what I'm sitting here dwelling on and typing notes about is when I refer to being disoriented, being, I distance myself, like what you talked about. I distance myself now, but then I want to connect what I missed out on connecting with myself. That's the result. That's why I don't want to fall out of the orientation of owning my experience. And so I didn't fall into, disorientation. I disoriented myself. And by stating it in that, by stating it out there, I distanced myself and I lost the chance to increase my own personal agency, my own connection with myself, and what I ultimately, for me, feel is at the bottom of that is sanity, is peace. I peace myself if I connect. So when I am falling out, I am losing connection with myself.
Yes.
I like it. I like it. I like
That would
that
be, I like
understanding.
myself. No,
I like myself. I like that revealing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now that I almost tried to wrap it up, there's lots of activity. CB. I'm still I'm still interesting myself with the edges where SAGE breaks down. What about a person being raped who owns they are violating themselves? I appreciate that. I've posed the same thing before, and I'll let you address it again.
Yeah. So a few things. One is we make a distinction between physical harm and psychological perceived threats. So if a person is in a car accident or if a person is raped, something, particularly the rape, something has been done to that person. They have been harmed. They have been victimized. Now the question is, how do they make meaning of that? What do they do after the event in terms of, do they continue to hold on to the experience in a way where they repeatedly victimize themselves? Or do they step into an empowered stance and say, how can I work with this? How can I make meaning of this in a way that will help me, that will be constructive? So there's that distinction when, if somebody punches you in the face, they've actually done something to you. And now the question is, what do I do with that? So that's one part. Your comment, about the edges where S.A.G.E breaks down, I haven't found them.
Right.
I haven't found them. So.
And I'll say I've questioned a lot of them. I don't know if there's any left. There may be, but I've come with concerns about where it could feel unfair, where I'm concerned, gosh, is that unfair in regards to that, like the concept of rape or whatnot. And so far they've been successfully reconciled for me. But happy to talk about them here. And CB also says, I do reorient towards agency, but concern myself about spiritual bypassing and inviting scapegoating and gaslighting. Let me hit just the spiritual piece real quick, and then if you want to speak to scapegoating and gaslighting, CB, I come from a religious construct, Christianity, and have a lot of friends who embrace and engage with that construct of religion. And the speaking of towards personal agency, and where I even go further with complete personal agency, I see their feathers bristle sometime, and it would have mine. They bristle their own feathers and fend themselves. I would have as well in the past. There's a bigger conversation, an opportunity for one, I believe, on this topic, literally to get biblical. And you didn't say you were coming from a Christian standpoint, but from a lot of the spiritual aspects, that one included, I find that they are, if we take them contextually, very promoting of our personal agency. Even the concept of faith is something that again, you can get into concepts of free will and whatnot, but I feel like we are called to, in our agency, make an acceptance of something, put faith in something, put trust in something that we're not forced to. And ultimately we're taking that on ourselves. I am trusting myself and my perspective on X. And that's my personal agency. And even if it's a submission that you may feel, I'm doing that of my own free will and personal agency. I am doing that for me. That's one part of an answer to your question, or a response to your question.
And my question is, what do you mean by spiritual bypassing? What's an example where I would use S.A.G.E and it would come across as spiritual bypassing?
My interpretation of that, and what have talked with other, it's Celeste. Thanks. Talked with other folks from the Christian orientation, is that the personal agency could bypass God's perceived power, God's will for your life, God's plan for your life. That's a much debated thing, even within Christianity, that concept of even the aspect of free will, how much, or is God micromanaging everything? Do you have free will? So there's some debates there, even within their own religion. And the concept of personal agency can, in my past, I would have interpreted that as you feeling you are all powerful, you're God. And some of those things can be people can feel very threatened with
Yeah.
some of those concepts, how they perceive them.
Celeste, if you're willing, maybe you can tell us what you mean by spiritual bypassing. What's an example where I would use SAGE and you would be concerned that I might be spiritually bypassing?
If you want to address too, she said it is I concern myself about spiritual bypassing and inviting scapegoating and gaslighting. Gaslighting, of course, is a big term these days.
Yeah, I'd need a lot of, I don't understand these
Practical examples.
questions. And I don't mean that critically. I just I don't think that way. So I need help understanding.
Well, and Celeste, you can respond as he's asked. My gut reaction or response, my gut feeling on gaslighting is if you're not validating someone else's perspective.
Well, I don't validate someone's perspective because I have too much respect for them to do that. So I awkward myself sometimes with these because I don't sort of understand. I guess there's an assumption that validating is being supportive. And yet I would challenge that idea. I think I want to be very careful about what I reinforce when other people tell me about themselves or the world. I want to be very intentional about what I reinforce.
Okay, Celeste says bypass was in reference to harm being done physically and feeling responsible for it. I'm not sure I follow that, Celeste. I'm sorry. If you want to clarify that a little bit more, and you had referenced the bypassing to spiritual, and now you're saying physical harm. If you want to clarify that more. Mary said, time is a moving verb. Sage language is in motion. Past,
Yeah.
present, future can be reframed.
Yes. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yasmin says, I feel connected to myself, which I make myself feel calm with. I also feel a good amount of stimulation in my brain while choosing the words I choose to use or choosing to stay in silence.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I have similar experiences.
Yeah. Back to awareness, as we were talking about with Ram Dass, I feel sometimes as if I am in my awareness, I'm almost not removed sounds negative, but I'm stepped back and able to be to observe instead of just being caught up.
Yeah. Observe, witness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Celeste, the reason I ask you about these things is that I think of SAGE as taking such a strong level of responsibility that the idea of bypassing or scapegoating seems foreign to me.
Right.
But I'm really happy to explore if you provide more context.
A lot of these questions too come up because we usually live in OS2.
Right.
And we can't see OS3 until we're in there.
Yes. I have a bit of I chipped my own shoulder with gaslighting somewhat. It's been so used, and I feel like if someone disagrees with you and does not validate your perspective, which is often shared objectively, then you're blamed for gaslighting. And I've seen debates with psychologists questioning if pointing out gaslighting is gaslighting. And I don't know. At this point with Sage, I just feel like I'm going to choose to put trust in. You can't gaslight me. I can only gaslight me. So, and I don't want to do that. So I'm good.
Right.
Jared says, yes, that's powerful. He's quoting you, Jake. I think you said, I want to be intentional about what I reinforce in others.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the praise and blame, even reinforcing the praise.
Jared, I wish more psychotherapists would say that, because in an attempt to be supportive, it's so common that we validate a story that's not constructive. Somebody says something happened, it was difficult, and the therapist says, that must have been so difficult. Just deepens the groove. And so, yeah, really careful about what I reinforce.
Yeah. Yeah. I struggle with the validation concept. People want to be validated in a story that I feel like they're seem to be harming themselves with often. Um, we're at the hour. Uh,
Okay.
uh, well, here's Ralph. I'll read one more. Spiritual bypassing is feeling depressed and telling myself I'm not depressed since I want to consider myself as an enlightened being. He thinks is one example. Feeling depressed and telling myself I'm really not depressed. Thoughts?
So in Sage, I would say I'm depressing myself. Um, Telling myself I'm not really depressed to me would be a form of repression. I don't know if that's a form of spiritual bypassing. I suppose it could be. Um, but I'm not taking ownership of what I'm doing to myself. That's why I think in Sage, I'm unlikely to experience, I'm unlikely to bypass myself spiritually because I'm taking so much responsibility. I think of spiritual bypassing more goes back to a conversation we had with Kevin when he said something like, well, I guess that's meant to be. And that to me implied that there was some greater force, entity, being that was driving his life. And I know some people believe that. And do you remember that, Kevin?
Yeah, yeah. I said I'm not sure if it was looking for a home if it was meant to be, and
Right.
there was I used another term along those lines. Yeah, yep, yeah,
And as soon as you change that to taking ownership of what was going on, if there was any spiritual bypassing going on, I think that it went away, that you eliminated that.
yeah.
So again, we'll wait to hear more from you, Celeste, but my sense is that Sage minimizes spiritual bypassing, doesn't foster it.
Yeah, she said she's hiking actually and was losing service, so she would follow up maybe to the article, to your
Great.
blog. I assume is
Please
what she's
do.
saying. Yeah, and I appreciate that, Ralph, sharing that. And I think back to, on the depressed aspect, I'm feeling depressed. Now I'm thinking about what you said, Jake. Can I put depressed in a wheelbarrow?
Yeah.
Uh, Apparently not. So what am I feel? I'm depressing myself. I do, Ralph. One thing on that is I have just an awareness of myself, and I realize, goodness, yeah, I'm in this case. If I'm depressing myself, or I often find that I'm feeling that I'm saddening myself, and these days where I'm at, I'm going to let myself. I'm going to let myself sadden myself, um, and then be curious. Why am I? Um, and again, then we get to choose what we want to do with that. Do we want to continue depressing ourselves? Do I want to continue saddening myself? Again, sometimes I may say, yeah, for a little while. I may even watch a sad movie and deepen it and kind of
Yeah.
play with it.
Is this serving me well?
Yeah. 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 Which, well, and again, then we get to do what we want. For me, as someone who I feel has not ever allowed my self to marinate a little bit, I tend to say, I think I'm going to serve myself by feeling what it likes, not to just suppress or reject
Mhm.
sadness, saddening myself. So I allow myself to sadden myself. But yeah, exactly. Is it serving me? Okay.
Kevin, I want to validate that you have great taste in hats.
Yes. Everybody should see that. It is so Jake and Hannah live in, it's Hawi, Hawaii, which they taught me is pronounced Javi, like Havi, Javi. And I saw this hat. I don't know if somebody was wearing it or if you were, I can't remember. And, and really liked it. And so this was my birthday present. Have a nice day. Yeah.
So
Ralph says he sent you an email. on spiritual bypassing just now.
All right. All right.
Okay.
Maybe
Okay.
that'll be the next article. Thanks, Ralph.
Beautiful. Thank you all. I'm
Yeah.
just grateful for the engaging with this and disorienting ourselves together.
Yes. Have a
Yeah.
nice day, everyone.
Have a nice day, everyone.
Okay.